Hey folks, so Steph Pennell from ZoomInfo and I are back for part 2 of our conversation. We are talking about how to overcome sales and marketing misalignment when it comes to events specifically. In part 1, we talked a lot about uniting your revenue teams around shared goals, clear objectives, and how to really make sure you're nailing the communication component of all of that. And in part 2, what I want to get into with Steph is understanding how she approaches lead management, really implementing lead management. We know it's essential in terms of making the most of event generated opportunities. And I want you, Steph, to kind of just walk us through what that process is for capturing, qualifying, distributing event leads. And I think this is very much tied to my questions around, your post-event playbooks,
Mm-hmm.
which, is so crucial. Like I said at the end of part 1, we can't just magically expect revenue to appear after an event. And so I would love to understand the processes you've put in place for your team and for ZoomInfo to make the most of your events and get the best ROI possible.
Yeah, so this is really beyond me and my team's scope. Like this involves so much of the marketing and sales team. And the more we kind of evolve in this area, the more we figure it out. So where it currently stands is when I took over the team, there were like quite a few statuses of leads. And I became close with our senior director of growth and optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And she is so very smart. Her name is Deeksha. And I sat with her and her team and we were like, okay, like we really need to figure out how to start tracking all these things. And the one thing she suggested that I loved was we got to simplify um, the lead statuses.
Hmm.
Like there were like 6 or 7 in there, I think. And
Wow.
so we got it down to 3. And so we've got engaged, which is they came to the booth, they had a one-on-one meeting. Not they came to the booth and just stole swag and ran away. We stopped scanning a lot of those people, not a
Yeah.
qualified lead. They attended one of our private hosted events. They attended one of our sessions at a trade show. They scanned one of our QR code offerings at the booth or at the event. So those are our engaged people.
Mm-hmm.
We have registered. Obviously, they registered, but maybe didn't attend. They engaged before, didn't attend. You get the drift. And then
Yep.
cold, invited but did not respond, or lead lists from a trade show with the engaged folks removed.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, what we started doing recently is of the executives who are on site, giving them that engaged list after the fact. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a big event, yeah, sometimes it can be, over 100 people, but they also know like who the important conversations were, and we give them like 24, 48 hours to as we're doing the list uploads into our CRM,
Mm-hmm.
right? We kick that list over to sales and say, hey, of these highly engaged hot leads, who do you want to do personalized outreach to,
Mm-hmm.
and who do you want us to manage the outreach to? And so they'll kind of filter out, okay, I want to manage the outreach for this and specific follow up to this conversation. Another thing we're trying to start implementing is if you have a conversation like that on site, just pre booking. We're playing around with different methods of doing this, but booking a meeting on site while you're having the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in some cases, our follow up is already done when you're still at the event. Um, Anyone that doesn't go into that bucket, we'll still make it pretty personalized outreach. A lot of times it'll come from an executive who is on site, whether it be their alias email account or via outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we'll tag it to the AM or the SDR pairing to that person, and provide them the copy. Like it's very like plug and play. Like they can just take the copy, hit send, personalize a little bit if they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, that's when the IMM team comes in and those leads get filtered into the proper go to market play. So there's a bunch of go to market plays that we use and are constantly running. managed by that team. We do have actually a free library on our website. I think it's just zoominfo.com/go-to-market-plays. And you can kind of check them out. So we kind of just filter them into that right place. But I think like the big difference is really identifying those key people and those key accounts. And it's a little bit manual, but going the
Mhm.
extra mile. And, salespeople want to take care of the people that they connected with on site, especially if it was a great discussion. They're going to
Yeah.
be willing to reach out. Like realistically, that's part of their everyday job is following up with these people.
Absolutely. They want the opportunity to connect and capture and hold the attention of these people.
Yeah.
Can you you mentioned a little bit 24 to 48 hours SLA. Can you kind of break down like what are your expectations in terms of the timeline of when each of these actions, follow-up actions is happening in a perfect world? Obviously there's things that happen sometimes, but
Yeah.
like no barring any crazy hiccups or whatever, what would be an ideal kind of like post-event follow-up timeline in your mind?
Yeah. So that first 48 hours, I sound like a true crime episode of something. Um,
Is
it's
that
really
we
important.
actually we should that's like an idea for like a future like podcast spin-off
Yeah.
series, like the first 48 hours post-event.
Yeah.
Like,
Very important. Everything
yeah.
can change. Everything
Yeah.
will go cold. It's true. Um, so that's why, and I cannot take all the credit for this. The two women on my team right now, they like have just mastered this completely.
Mm.
So while the lead list is being uploaded, they work simultaneously with sales, and ideally within that first 48 hours is when things are going out. With trade shows, it's tough. You don't have control over when you might be getting that full lead list. But if we already have the hot scans from the booth or any side sessions we did, we don't wait for the rest. And then we just pull those contacts out when we get the list. So,
Smart.
like, it's tiered. We don't want to keep anything on the table, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think, yeah, like the majority of the time that we run into like a snag with that is if it's a trade show and we are waiting for some of like these session attendees, for example, like
Mm-hmm.
you obviously want to know if someone came to your booth and also attended a session or two and then came
Yeah.
to your happy hour, like
Super
that's
relevant
like
information.
on fire.
Yeah.
So or they just like
That's the
freestyle.
dream, right?
Yeah, that's the dream.
Come to everything we're doing.
Yeah. um so you like definitely that like kind of stinks if you don't see that, but if you're treating them as a hot lead from another way, then great, and you can follow up with them outside of that. And then the only other thing that I've seen like massively get in our way is like the 4th of July. So like was it what event were we at? Oh, Snowflake. So we just did Snowflake,
Right.
and like 4th of July was right after. So um, the event ended on a Thursday. Like obviously lead list like came in. So then we attempted to get it uploaded, but then it was Friday and then it was the weekend and then it was 4th of July and then everybody was out of office. So the
Right.
only way that actually kind of still did work in our favor is that all the people we were trying to reach out to were
We're
probably all
also probably out
yeah.
of office.
So like just weird things like that.
That actually was going to be another question. Do you ever, I guess like I would be I would have the worry, I guess, of like, well, if we send the follow up like too soon, is it getting, and like the person or the people you're following up with are like still at the trade show or the conference, like is that follow up email like getting buried and lost in the sauce? Like,
Mm,
I don't know about you, but like when I'm on site at a conference, my inbox is a dumpster fire.
yeah.
And I'm trying to stay on top of it, of course, and I like leave everything marked unread so that I remember to come back to it because I'm famous for like reading something, replying in my head, and then going about my merry way. But I'm just curious, like, if you okay, so you are making sure you're getting the lead list uploaded, then there's that like kind of like 48-hour window where sales can say we really want to own these personal follow-ups and do that outreach, and marketing you can do the rest. What happens after that? I'm curious, like, well, you kind of said you'll put the people into the specific go-to-market plays.
Yep.
Love that. um what what are the other kind of like major components of your post-event playbook? And I'm also curious, like, yeah, just any other kind of major aspects that you're like, this is so important, we do this every single time, it's like a non-negotiable. And are there any things that you're testing coming up, with, like, Dreamforce in September, or any other large events, or even your own events? I'm also curious, like, if your post-event playbook, how that differs from your own events, compared to a larger conference or trade show.
Yeah, it's a little different. And you said something I wanted to respond to. Oh, yeah. If I met someone on site in a trade show, for example, and they send me something while I am still there, or like even worse in the airport, I am like, archive. So here's why. Fun fact: event marketers love the event leading up to it. And then on the last day, like, I don't know about anybody else, but I am like, nobody talk to me. Like, all the adrenaline just comes out of your body. And like, the last thing I want to do is get sold to. And so I assume others feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, ideally, people are probably home by the time like 48 hours goes by, or a few
Mm-hmm.
days. And I think, like, if there's anything that ties us up, as long as we get to those like very identifiable like top target accounts, we're fine.
Yeah.
More intricately, we definitely usually do 2 touch points before we put them into a minimum of 2 before we put them into our ongoing plays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the first is like either, hey, sorry I missed you, hey, thanks for coming.
Right.
If we have a recording, share that out, all that good stuff. We also try to do some sort of like post-event asset, both
Mm-hmm.
for the people who attended and not, to get like a snippet of what was going on, or a recap. And the one thing, if you want to hear about something new that we're trying, is we are starting to work with content. So, as we're presenting to these people, we know what we're going to be talking about.
Right.
What we don't know is like the questions that may arise, or their responses and things like that. So content is really great. They're going to start making the shell of a piece of content before the event.
Mm-hmm.
So after the event, they can plug and play the pieces where people engaged, and we got the feedback, and we asked the questions, and all the good stuff. And that way they can turn it around faster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the new
So
thing we're
smart.
testing out, which I'm super excited about, because it's always like a scramble, right? It's like, okay, we got the list upload, and then, okay, now here's the recording, and we got to upload it. And then, like, all right, now here's the content. Like, what do we include? So if we have
Mm-hmm.
like that base beforehand, I think that'll also be a huge game changer in how quickly we can get that post event asset out as well.
Love that. Please report back on
Oh,
how that's working. That's
yeah.
something I think that we are hoping to do as well. We've kind of tested or tried to. We haven't actually released that piece of content yet that has been pre-built, right?
Yeah.
We're very well versed with the post-event mad dash scramble.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do like an overnight oats situation that's
Yeah.
pre-baked. You know what I mean? That you just
I
put
love
your little
that.
fruit on top right before you want to eat it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Overnight oats.
I'm can you tell I'm hungry? I'm also a big foodie, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love food
Yeah.
references. Okay, so that's really helpful to hear that there's like, you're not just plugging people into a nurture sequence or a go to market play. You're like you're having 1 to 2 touch points
Yeah.
beforehand. That's really helpful to hear. Any other like playbook wisdom you want to share, something that has like worked well, if no pressure if not, because I feel like you've provided so many helpful tips and suggestions, but I want to just, since I have you here, I want to just see if there's any, let's leave no stone unturned, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, our playbooks are so important to our team success. And
Mhm.
I feel like I've been on this soapbox for the last quarter or two, at least at Splash. Like, we've got to focus on our playbooks. We've got to focus on our playbooks. Like, if I'm seeing performance not meeting of certain event programs not meeting expectations, my first question is like, well, where do we need to tighten up or
Yeah.
our playbook, or where in our playbook do we need to revisit what we're doing? To see better or different results. So I'm curious if there's just like any final playbook pro tips that you have up your sleeve that you definitely want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, so I think from a plays perspective, there are definitely people at ZoomInfo that can speak to it way better. What I will say, in something that works for us when it's still in our hands, is if you have an executive comfortable with building an alias, um, it really goes a long way.
Mm,
And then, like, it's not to say that we're pretending to be our executives. We send the initial one and then we do loop them in, and it is an organic conversation.
mm-hmm.
um, and we get a lot of help. We made a lot of great friends with the chief of staffs in the organization and the executive assistants who are grinding every day on stuff like that. So I will say that is something that has also helped move the needle with us. But I'll defer to my awesome colleagues on the playbook like after that point.
That's fair. And also ZoomInfo is known for playbooks. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I know that word carries a lot of significance.
Yes.
Um, okay, before we move on, because I do want to get into, why do we need even a post event playbook? Well, because we need to make sure we're measuring and analyzing the right things. But before we do that, because in part one, you had mentioned it was just like such a, almost like an amazing mic drop moment when you just mentioned that like 2 weeks leading up to a major conference, your team was able to pre-book
Oh,
150 meetings. So I'm sorry, but we just need to rewind, circle back to that. And I need to understand how
yeah.
your team accomplished it. It's amazing. Your sales team is also much larger than our sales team, so I have to like keep that in mind.
Yes.
Comparison is the thief of joy. So like maybe we won't get 150 pre-book meetings in 2 weeks because we don't have as many people working on that. But I would love to learn a little bit about how you approach that and what you think led to that success.
Yeah. So we did not, and we are not this year either, actually sponsoring at Dreamforce. We're doing our own thing on the side. And so that was the plan last year. I wasn't in this role yet. I was still acting as
Mm.
a chief of staff. And I don't know, gosh, like maybe a month before the event or so, they were like, hey, like we could use some support here. And there wasn't like a whole lot going on, but they did have a executive suite at the Marriott Marquis where they could take one-on-one meetings. And so I was like, okay, great. And it was a struggle. There was no real like process in place. So I kind of just pulled in what I did at my last company. At this point, I didn't really know the major players. I didn't, work with the events team. So like Rachel and Jordan on the team now, back then they didn't report to me. I was just like, guys, let's do this, let's do that. And Jen, who was on the team at the time, and it came about really quick. Like it was a cluster. But the needle mover there was executive and leadership buy-in and push. And it was coming from them. It was a desire to come from them. Like, hey, Henry's going to be on site. Chris is going to be on site. Scott's going to be on site. All of our executives are going to be there. And we have blocks in the day. where they're not in a meeting that's already booked. Let's fill them.
Yep.
And then got a call from Marriott, and they were like, yeah, so there's a maintenance issue in the suite, and we can't give you the space anymore. And I was like, okay, you mean you overbooked and we don't have the suite anymore?
Yeah.
So I did like the initial, like, okay, like, what's the maintenance problem? Can we work around it? Like, did all those types of things. And then I got to the, like, all right, put your big girl hat on. If you can't give us this, what are you giving us?
Mm-hmm.
And they had a rundown sneaker store in the front of the Marriott marquee, like Nike swish and all, like on the walls. And so that was 5 days before the event.
Oh my
And
God.
honestly, I don't remember looking back, like how many meetings we had at that point. But once we knew we were going to have this bigger space, we were like, let's book more meetings. And then it was just like, I mean, I think we had SDRs calling and booking stuff over the weekend. And then like the event started Tuesday. So we booked a bunch more in on Monday. And it was the very like baby version of how we book events and book pre-book meetings now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it looks like now is Rachel on my team actually built out this like gorgeous like workflow. And it's basically like, okay, like if they're an executive, the ask should come from an executive theoretically, or an account manager if they have like a really good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So for those are going to be a little bit more bespoke. We're essentially creating lists for, I think we have quite a few people attending, but 7 core executives that we're going to actively try to book meetings for.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, we are going to pull, like they like to call it a parking lot of like people we'd like to meet with. And basically like assign those out like 100 per executive.
Okay.
And whether we send it in outreach from them, or they want to send it themselves, we'll get those out the door and help them manage their responses, alongside with for those 7, we are utilizing the EAs and the chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
And they're super strong. They're really easy to work in lockstep with. The tiers down are going to be outreach either from automated from account managers or SDRs.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're like kicking off with the sales frontline managers, the SDR frontline managers, implementing spiffs. The top 5 people who get the most meetings that are qualified and show up will get a gift card.
How
And
much
so
is the gift card?
from gift card,
Yeah.
Visa, we're just going to do cash gift card.
Oh, love
But
that.
I haven't identified the amount yet. Stay tuned.
Okay. Well, I'll email you on the side.
Yeah. They don't even know yet. So,
Great. That's great.
yeah. And so for that, so the top tier, like in hindsight, really the executive assistant or chief of staff is going to work with my team, say, hey, yes, this is a qualified meeting. We're
Mm-hmm.
building out a shared calendar. Every invite is going to come from the same account, so that my core team and the executive assistant team can manage that cohesively.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll send out the invites. And then for the mid to lower tier level, that's where they'll put in the request to us as the events team. We'll qualify that the meeting is worth it. We will send the invite, and the SDR is then responsible to going to the AM to get the briefing. So that is one thing. We are not accepting a meeting unless it's qualified or has a brief. So everything is going to have both of those attached with a folder for each executive. We have like this really pretty Google spreadsheet that's going to have all that housed in there. And so the flow it's dependent on like the level of the person we're reaching out to, but ultimately the same in the fact that once we get the meeting submitted, they want to come meet with us. It goes in to make sure it's qualified. We assign it to the executive, and then the back end process happens of the SDR or the events team or EA goes and gets that briefing from the AM, attach it into a master folder for each executive. And yeah, we go from there.
Wow. I mean, chef's kiss, that sounds amazing. And I'm so glad we're recording this so I don't have to take notes, because the platform that we're recording in will give me a transcript of this, and I'm going to
Oh,
literally send it internally and be like, this is what we need to be doing. So
realistically, Rachel on my team is your girl. I'll set you up.
I might need a one-on-one sesh with Rachel.
Well, last year at Dreamforce, because of the short time frame, I was like, we got to do this, like create a spreadsheet. And I just like kind of like tossed it at her. And boy, has she like really like she's really evolved it, and it's getting so good. It's so good.
I love that. That sounds amazing. And I wish a Rachel on everyone's team. I definitely have a Rachel on my team. Her name is Haley Kaplan, and she
Yeah.
sounds like a Rachel to me. But that's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so my next and kind of like second to last question for you. I'll have like a general one, and actually maybe I'll ask you a surprise one as well, just for fun at the end. But keep you on your toes. But I really want to talk about, okay, so we talked about like how to drive all of this, success and really getting into the nitty gritty of the motions and the playbooks that you're leading and executing for ZoomInfo.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we need to talk a little bit more about the measuring and analyzing the results to really inform future strategy. And I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to some of the KPIs that you use to really evaluate. You talked about the different types of events that you run, kind of, internal, the owned, the third party. You can share internal if you want, but I think I would love to focus on the ZoomInfo's owned and third party, or trade show event KPIs that are most meaningful to you, the ones that you really look to, the ones that you're like reporting out on and then using to inform your own strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you have like an example of an event that can kind of bring all of that to life.
Yeah. So also right in the thick of it. So I know I know I mentioned Deeksha in part one. And so her team has been absolutely amazing. And when it comes to metrics for anything in marketing, the best thing you can do is align to what sales is looking at. And I'm sure you can believe it. Our team loves data. And so, oh my gosh, wait,
Wait,
sidebar.
shocker, what?
Yeah, sidebar. One of the things we do, also a shocker, for our pre-booked meetings is we have this really cool tool called ZoomInfo. And we populate lists
What?
for outreach. And that's where we'll pull like, okay, like renewals, upcoming renewals and stuff like that. But we do targeted lists of like where people are based and all that good stuff. So just FYI, I can't believe I left that out.
I think that is actually, yeah, that's critical to
Yeah,
your formula for success here. Thank you for
yeah.
mentioning that.
It's like, where do you guys get the people from?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Um,
We're big fans of ZoomInfo as well.
yeah. Another fun thing we're doing is actually also pulling all of the attendees from our most recent events and reaching out to them for a follow up too. So FYI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, back to the topic at hand. Our Tableau dashboard is the most glorious thing I've seen in a long time. That Deeksha's team built out. And again, obviously, metrics for events can't be like apples to apples
Right.
with what other pieces of marketing and definitely sales are looking at. And there's like the normal things we have access to, like how many lead scans, attendees,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. But what the dashboard is allowing us to do, and we're on like version 2 right now. So like I could retroactively go back and look at like some of the most recent events, and I've been playing with it. But the core ones are pipeline in a room. So like
Mm-hmm.
influence pipeline at the time of the event.
Yep.
Um, event engaged ACV1. So any wanting that engaged status and how much ACV was won from them. I like looking at new business versus existing business to
Mm.
see what events that'll help us like identify for future. Okay, like we know this is going to be an existing play. Like we need a few more things that can hit the new. And then segment percentage. So how many leads were up market? So a major company goal is moving up market, and
I can agree. Like for all of us, I mean.
yeah, yeah. And so I guess I can share this metric. So in looking at our Q2 numbers for events, of the event engaged ACV that was won, 97% of that is from Strat and accounts.
That's
So
amazing.
So basically, we walked away like after pulling that and being like, okay, from an event standpoint, we are definitely getting in front of the right people, going to the right events, hosting the right events, targeting the right people. But it also comes back to a big portion of that is also the private hosted events where you can own who shows up. And so that's where Jordan on my team is the master. She has that system down packed of how to get those people into those events. It's
Mhm.
very, very targeted and like niche. So those are the big ones. And then some other fun ones that I've started looking at is what accounts we influence, like the top 5,
Mhm.
their industry. So like as we think about like, do we want to attempt any industry focused events? It's like, okay, like here are the ones we typically get. So
Yep.
we can either lean into it or, we already have it covered. Uh,
Mhm.
so those are the fun ones. And the next iteration, we are adding into our campaign within Salesforce, our event campaign. We're going to add how much the event cost,
Yeah.
estimate and actual, and then we'll be able to pull in the ROI.
Yeah. Yeah. We're big on that as well.
Yeah.
It's been really helpful to have that insight. The next future for us, which we have not gotten there, but something we've been talking about is, like getting a truer event cost, not just like the financial cost, but like the
Mm.
time investment,
Oh
like
yeah.
how much, which that's more involved to measure and track that because essentially you need your employees, at least on marketing, to like track their hours
Yeah.
related to a particular event or a particular event program, which is
Yeah.
not necessarily an easy habit to turn on. There's like
Yeah.
certain departments beyond marketing where, it is hourly. And so they like have that muscle and that habit of like literally tracking everything they do.
Yeah.
You don't
Like
have
agency
that.
life.
Exactly. Exactly. So we've been talking about like how we could maybe start to get even
Mm.
a ballpark estimate
Yeah.
to help with planning for 2024 and think about
Mhm.
like yes, maybe this event program or this one event was super successful, but it was like 10x the time investment compared to this other one, which was maybe less successful, but such a low lift that we could do more of them, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's really interesting. We should brainstorm that together because one of the things we started looking at too is like total cost of the event without T&E and with T&E.
yep.
And it's interesting. So like if a salesperson like, books a flight, we try to keep it in a group in our travel booking system so we
Hmm.
can see like the cost affected by everyone. At least for a hotel and airfare. And but like if it's a salesperson, when they code that and expense that, it hits the sales T&E budget, not the events T&E budget.
Exactly. Yeah.
So unless we're looking at that, it's hitting somewhere else. So we've started thinking about that, but it's you also think about like, okay, you're sending X, Y, and Z amount of salespeople
That means they're
to
not
the
doing their
event.
job too while they're at their event, like their other day-to-day job,
Yeah,
which has
yeah, yeah.
another opportunity cost.
Yeah, so what is that opportunity cost? Yeah,
Yeah,
like if I pull like 3 SDRs to be a brand ambassador at Dreamforce, how many dials are they not making that day? It's
exactly.
like it's really, yeah, that's a really interesting thing to talk about, and I hope um our COO doesn't hear me saying any of this because he's
I
like,
know,
oh
it's
yeah,
like kind
don't
of like
do
the
that.
kiss of death. It's like, shh, shh, shh. Don't just don't
We're
reach
gonna move on. We'll talk about that one offline.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, just don't tell your COO about this episode. No, it is helpful though to hear, how you think about all of that. It's, measuring ROI is not it's not necessarily a very straightforward
No.
process.
Yeah.
And I think it gets I like hearing about how you frame it, the pipeline in the room at the time, all those things is helpful because it's very easy to get caught up in the game of attribution.
Yeah.
And um I I actually was just recording a podcast episode with the CEO of Refine Labs, Chris Walker, and we got
Mhm.
onto this topic. And he's a really big champion for like self-reported attribution and the power of dark social and all of these channels, marketing channels that are not perfectly trackable.
Yeah.
But are still very valuable. And I'm really happy that events are much more trackable today. I feel
Yeah.
like when I started my career, it was like, was it a big flashy event? And
Yeah.
that was like the barometer of success. And
Yeah.
now it's so different. And I love how much more sophisticated most of us are, and many organizations, especially like, B2B SaaS organizations are when it comes to their events. Um, and at the same time, I think it's helpful for departmental owners, like functional area owners like you, like me, to like know what their metrics are for their area, and to be able to tell that weather report, um
Yeah.
and report on what's working and what's not working. And at the same time, I feel like sometimes you go like a little it's easy to get a little too far down into that rabbit hole where it's like, was it influenced or was it sourced from the event? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I had an example of was digging into a report from a dinner we hosted earlier in the year, and it was like, wait a second, I really thought that we had sourced at least one op from we do a lot of like these like small dinners where our expectations are to source like maybe 1 to 2 new ops, but it's a lot of like trying to influence existing ops, push those
Mhm.
deals closer to closed one.
Yep.
And but I like just anecdotally remembered that like I knew we like got sourced an op, but then I looked at my dashboard and it said all influenced, and then I dug in and I literally like spent probably 20 minutes like following this little trail, searching in Salesforce, looked at the contact who attended the dinner, and I saw the
Yeah.
note from the BDR who had invited the person. And the note was like, well, they didn't actually know about Splash until they got invited to this dinner.
Yep.
And I was like, aha, we did
Yeah.
source this off because it would not exist if we had not thrown this dinner this
Yeah.
month. So it's just like, but I don't, you know, and I want to be able to answer that question when our VP of finance or, head of biz ops is like, hey, well, great that this event, influenced and sourced or like touched 30 ops, but like how many were influenced and how many were truly sourced, and I'm like,
Yeah.
we can get into that, but it depends on your attribution model and a couple of other things. So I always like caution, like,
Yeah.
don't get sucked into the black hole of
Yeah.
attribution.
Yeah. It's specific to what your org wants and needs. And like, same with ROI. And so I think like we've been lucky because um there's like this common like sense of we just want to win at ZoomInfo, like
Mhm.
across the org. I've never seen anything like it.
That's
And
awesome.
so I have two examples of like I think like the attribution piece versus influence is different based on the type of event. So
Mhm.
like we did like a Gartner conference, and the rep who was on site, net new deals, and one closed for like 100K, like almost immediately after. And her manager came to me and were like, we want you to know this because we want you to tell the story so you can get more budget and do more of these events.
Yes.
And so like obviously we're relying on that there. We do have an option within Salesforce that someone can select, like this is 100% attributed to events. But then on the smaller event side, it's even easier. So we do have one virtual series.
Mm-hmm.
We don't manage the webinars, but we have one virtual series where it's a wine tasting. And Jordan on my team is the one who also does that. It's considered a private hosted for us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's as little as like 5 to 6 people. And we have the wine tasting, and someone from the ZoomInfo team gets on and talks about whatever the topic is. We base it on like a product. So like 1 month it'll be marketing OS and intent and ABM
Mm-hmm.
and AI, and the next it'll be DAS, and we'll partner with Snowflake. And a lot of these times these people get on and they're customers but don't know everything that we offer
Right.
or like the full picture. And so we'll get an email like a few weeks after, and like an event that cost us $2,000 all in
Mm-hmm.
just closed an over 100K deal, and then the next week it's a 75K deal. And so like that like
Epic.
that series is like paid for in tenfold. So,
Absolutely.
but it is event dependent. But again, relationship building. Like if you bring these people in, get them along for the ride, they want you to succeed because it helps them succeed. But they just have to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. What stuff? I feel like I could talk to you all day.
I know.
And this has been so fun. I have just like one final question. Well, I have two.
Okay.
The one was going to be any like, I always have to just ask. We're in such a rapidly evolving market, like you said. It's like there's constant iteration and evolution, and so I'm just like wondering if you have any like, if you want to give a little pep talk or like any final piece of advice for our listeners who are finding themselves in similar situations. um, but before, I'm going to let you think about that for a second.
Okay.
We'll come
Okay.
back to that. Um, are you down to do like, this is truly on the fly. Are you down
It
to
really
do,
is. I have no idea what's coming.
I know, like folks, I have truly not prepped her for this. Are you down to do a really quick round of this or that event marketing edition?
Yeah.
I'll just ask you a few questions of this or that, and you just tell me what your hot take is. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I can't promise something weird won't come out of my mouth, but yeah, let's go for it.
Even better. Okay. Um all right. So we'll start with an easy one. And listen, like there's no shade to like the if you pick the this or the that. There's no shade to the other option, right? It's just like
Mhm.
what you're drawn to, what you love a little bit more. So, let's start with like ZoomInfo owned events or like the trade show conference events.
Well, ZoomInfo owned because I can do them at trade shows as well.
Love it. Good answer. Listen, folks, ancillary wraparound events for the win.
For the win.
So many reasons why. I feel like you and I are very aligned on that on that point. Okay, that
Yes.
was that was that was that was fun one. Okay, let's mix it up. Breakfast event or dinner event?
Breakfast.
Tell me why.
If you're targeting more VP C-level executives, oftentimes they get up early because they have to work at the ass crack of dawn, and they're much more willing to like be doing something in the middle of the workday. But before it starts, I start them as early as 7 a.m. and people show up.
I love that. Okay. Next
Oh,
one.
it's more budget friendly.
Oh, yes, they are, because usually like less or little to no alcohol, which is very expensive.
Yeah, and breakfast is cheaper.
Breakfast is cheaper than dinner. This is smart. That's why you're now I'm understanding the strategy here, Steph. Okay, last one, just for fun. Thanks for humoring me. What is it going to be? Um. Uh. Ooh. Okay. Like like workshop or happy hour?
Workshop.
Okay, tell me why.
but also depends on your goal.
This is see, I agree, but let's just pick a hypothetical goal and tell me, or a particular goal you have in mind, and tell me why workshop would be your choice there.
I think workshop, like with either of you can go up market, but one of the biggest things you can do for your customers or future customers is position yourself as the thought leader and the um, person that they can lean on. In our case, we're trying to get people to lean on us for their go to market strategy.
Yep.
So in a workshop, you can give them the actual tools. Whereas in a happy hour, you're just maybe sharing, a glass of wine together. And that's great. Some stuff might come up, but
Right.
it's not as like when they walk away from that, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, that person at ZoomInfo is really cool. But when they walk away from a workshop, they have the tactical means and action items to put things to work in their own organization. But there is a time and a place for a happy hour from a brand awareness perspective, relationship building. They're just two very different events. But for what I think ZoomInfo's goals are and where we're headed, I think the workshop is more our direction.
Love it. Okay, last one, because I said I was going to be done with this last one, but I have one more, and it's not a this or that. It's just a, what is your least favorite month to plan events? Calendar month.
I
I
mean,
feel like there's some couple bad ones, but what's your
well,
least favorite?
do you mean like least favorite because
Like
there's
timing, just like timing. Like is there, I don't know, maybe you don't have one. Maybe this is just a me thing, but there's like certain months that I'm like, "Ugh, I know we need to have programming, but it's just like
yeah.
it's just hard because
I
of
don't
what's
even
happening in the world."
yeah, I don't even want to say like because you have like I don't feel like these months count, but the months where you're not going to get traction, which is like deep July and August, and
Mhm.
then November, December,
I
very tough.
agree. I agree.
January, the month that I feel like is, I guess there's 2 months, and it's like June and September because those months are the most inundated with the major trade shows. So you
Mhm.
lose a lot of your audience. June is like, I think I went to 2 Gartner events, 1 Forrester. I went to Forrester and like 4 in a row.
Mm.
Like I literally was just like I would see the same people at all these events. And then September is Inbound and Dreamforce. So
Yep.
when you're in this space, like they kind of have the market there.
Yeah.
Um, so that's when I do the side events at the events.
Mhm. Super smart. Okay. For real, for real. Now we can circle back to my my official last question, which is just any final words of wisdom or advice or pro tips when it comes to, aligning sales and marketing for event success. Any final words here that you want to share?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about it, and I cannot take credit for this, we recently joined this great community called Go to Market Partners. And
Me too.
oh my God, they're so great. So,
Yeah.
I went to the first event not that long ago. I'm so excited to work with them. Sangram and Brian are just amazing. And the rest of the team members I haven't met as much, but I saw them on stage. So good. And the way they talk about it and position it is so like on brand, even for events. And it's that in the very beginning of this podcast, you mentioned of part one, you mentioned like it's not just a marketing problem and it's not just a sales problem.
Right.
It's a go to market problem. And that is inclusive of customer success,
Yes.
of sales, of marketing, of product. And so it's not just you can't look at it one against the other. You have to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like when you start looking at it that way, that actually like changed the way I like started thinking about how we were going to iterate on some of the things we're doing for Dreamforce after that session. And so if you kind of have that mindset, I think that'll help you look at the bigger picture and understand. Because the more you understand what someone else needs, the more you know how to talk to them.
Mhm.
I mean, like as marketers, we're selling internally as well. Like
Absolutely.
we got to get these people on our page.
Mhm.
Um, And then, so I think that's that. But then like the like fun piece of advice for the event marketers out there is get scrappy, do less with more. Like if you have a meeting space like we do at Dreamforce, don't get food through the hotel or wherever it is. Go across the street to Target, stock up on all the snacks and like beverages that you need, put them in there. Don't pay like 700 for the monitors that they'll rent you. Go buy one for $200-300. You can sometimes return it after.
Yep.
Like they're like it might be a little bit more work, but in like the economy right now, like you will be a hero if you save money. Find the free venue. If you are public, NASDAQ has discounted event space you can use. Go do an event at NASDAQ. If you like, there's so many things like that. And then the one that I'm working on the most, and so I can't speak to it yet, but I've been talking to some other colleagues in the space, is just partners, 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 co-sponsor, support each other. Like it's not only half the budget, but half the support, however you line it up.
Yep.
And I think that's where a lot of what we're going to try to do is headed. And because I already hit you up for Dreamforce. So
Exactly, which I'm so excited for, and I could not agree more. I've been on a mission. I'm like, who can we partner with? There are so many people and brands that it would make sense to partner with.
yeah,
And like just reach out, make the ask,
yeah,
because you'll
doesn't hurt.
you'll probably get more yeses than nos. And it
Mm-hmm.
might not be a yes right now. Maybe it's a yes down the road when priorities and budgets and timing aligns. But
Yeah,
I fully, fully, fully support event partnerships in general. I think,
yeah,
we're hearing so many thought leaders just in general talk about like the future of business, not the future. I mean, it's happening right now, right? So I can't
yeah,
even say it's the future, but
yeah.
partnerships,
Mhm.
community building, events. I think, I'm so excited for people who are in our role and position, Steph, because I think that we're just going to, like, the role of the event marketer is only going to continue to be more and more crucial to business success. So I think that's great advice that you've given. And I just want to say thank you so much because, folks, I booked 60 minutes with Steph, and we've been like chatting for like coming up on 2 hours now, and it's just been so
It's
so
straight up getting
good.
dark over here. The sun is going down in Boston.
I mean, it's like past dinner time on the East Coast. I've got to let you go, but I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This has been such a fun recording session, and I feel like we have uncovered so many gems for our listeners. So thank you for being an open book and letting me ask all of my questions and dig and probe and make you explain things. You are clearly a force to be reckoned with. ZoomInfo is so lucky to have you and to have you in this role. And for our listeners out there, if you have any questions that you want to follow up on, any unanswered things that you still want to dig into, let us know. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can search for my name, Camille Whitestar, and I'm sure Steph would also not mind getting a note on LinkedIn, or you can join our community. I'll make sure that the link to join that is in the show notes. Um, and this has been such a pleasure. So for all of our listeners tuned in to part 1 and or part 2, well, if you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to that because there's so many more gems in there. Thank you so much to everyone who follows the show and supports the show. Steph, thank you again.
Thank
And
you. No, the pleasure was mine. Really, this was like so easy, but you kept me on my toes. But it was very, it was fun. It's cool to get down to the gritty nitty gritty stuff.
love it. Well, thank you again. And for everyone out there tuned in, until next time, take care.